I need to tell you something before this story starts properly. There's a thing that happens to a person when they have been alone for a very long time. Not lonely, alone. There is a difference. Lonely is an ache. Alone is just a condition, a state of the world. And some people, not many but some, learn to live inside that condition like it's a house they've built themselves. Stone by stone, room by quiet room. Edrin Voss was one of those people. He had been living alone in the Ashspine monitoring station for 3 winters by the time any of this began. Not because anyone forced him to. Not because he had no other choice. Because he had looked at the options in front of him and decided, with the calm, deliberate logic of a man who has thought too hard about everything, that solitude was the option that made the most sense. The station sat at the foot of the lower ridge, a prefabricated research outpost, hexagonal, reinforced against wind shear, equipped with thermal regulators, atmospheric sensors, a long-range communicator that worked maybe 60% of the time, and a kitchen that always smelled faintly of recycled processor air no matter how many times he cleaned it. The kind of place that looked, from the outside, like it had been dropped from a transport craft and forgotten. Because it had been. That's exactly what happened. The original survey team had departed, budget cuts. Reshuffling of priorities, Edrin had stayed. He will tell you if you ask him that he stayed because the data collection was ongoing and someone needed to manage the arrays. That's true. It's also not the whole truth. The whole truth is what this document is about. And it begins the way all strange things begin, with something small. Something so easy to explain away that a person doesn't even try very hard to explain it. A warmth that shouldn't have been there. Part 1, The First Winter. Chapter 1, Field Log, Entry 12W, November 14, 2041. Recovered from the Ashspine Station Primary Data Drive. Voice-to-text format. Minor transcription corrections applied. Original cadence preserved. Temperature outside hit -31 this morning. The atmospheric array flagged a pressure anomaly around 300 hours, so I was up early. Nothing unusual when I checked the sensors. Ice formation on the eastern ridge, normal for this time of year. The lower thermal vents are active, which means the rock beneath the station is still warm. That's good. That means the floor heating won't have to work as hard. I made coffee. I sat by the eastward observation window and watched the Ashspine turn from black to gray as the sun came up. It does that. It doesn't go straight to light out here. It goes through this long gray phase first, like the world is remembering how to wake up. At around 6:30, the perimeter sensor on the south exterior wall registered something. Not large. Thermal mass, approximately the size of, I'm going to say, a medium dog, which is odd, because there are no medium dogs in the Ashspine. There are ice foxes. There are the burrowing things that I've never properly identified but that I've decided to call ridge moles. There are occasionally survey drones from the Central Commission, though those don't show a thermal signature in the usual way. What I found when I went to check the exterior was nothing. No tracks. No mark in the snow except a small circular impression near the south ventilation exhaust where warm air comes out. Something had been sitting there, warming itself. I stood outside for about 2 minutes. My breath made clouds. The Ashspine was gray and very still and very large, and I was very small in it, and whatever had been at the ventilation exhaust was gone. I noted it in the log, moved on. That was the first time. Chapter 2, Witness Account, submitted to the Valereach Institute. Witness, Pira Dunson, Supply Runner, Northern Routes. Date of statement, March 2048. Interviewer, Dr. Amara Solis. I ran supplies to the Ashspine Station twice a year, once in early autumn before the freeze, and once in late spring when the passes opened back up. The winter runs were impossible. You couldn't get a ground vehicle through the lower ridge after November, and air transport was expensive enough that the Commission didn't authorize it except in emergencies. So I'd come in autumn and I'd come in spring and I'd spend a night at the station, maybe two, and then I'd head back. Edrin was always the same. I mean that in a good way. He wasn't changed by the time out there the way some people get changed. Some people go quiet in a bad way, caved in quiet, like something inside them has given up. Edrin was just settled, like a stone that's been in water long enough that it doesn't have any sharp edges left. The autumn I'm talking about, 2041, early November, he seemed fine. Normal. We ate together. He showed me some of the atmospheric readings that he thought were interesting. I pretended to understand them. He always did that. Showed me things he found genuinely exciting, and then immediately caught himself and apologized for being boring. He wasn't boring. I just didn't have the background to follow it. I left the next morning. He stood at the station door and watched me go. That was normal too. I always felt his eyes on my vehicle until I crested the first ridge and disappeared. What I didn't know, what none of us knew yet, was that something was already watching him back. Chapter 3. The warmth continued. The second time the perimeter sensor registered it was 3 days after the first. Edrin was asleep. The alarm was set to a low chime, not the emergency klaxon, just the soft one that meant something is there. Take note when you're ready. He woke up, rolled over, checked the panel above his bunk. South exterior again. Thermal signature, same approximate mass. This time he got up fast. He pulled on his outer layer, the insulated suit, the boots, the hood, and went to the south exterior door. Opened it quietly. The cold hit him like a wall. It always did, no matter how many years he'd been out there. Your body never stops being surprised by that kind of cold. Nothing at the ventilation exhaust. But the snow was disturbed. Not tracks exactly, more like two small hollows pressed into the snow near the exhaust duct, as if something had been curled there. And the hollows were warm. He put his hand in one and felt it, the residual heat of a living thing that had just been there, just left, just fled at the sound of a door. He stood for a long time looking at those hollows. Then he went back inside. He didn't note it in the official log. He wrote it in his personal journal instead, the paper one, the one he kept in the drawer under his bunk. He wrote, "Something is using my heat exhaust to stay warm at night. Small, shy, not threatening. I think it comes every night. I think I've been sleeping through it." He paused, then added, "I don't mind." Chapter 4. The camera. He set up a camera. Not a sophisticated one. Just the kind of compact environmental recorder the Commission used for wildlife surveying, small, weatherproof, designed to trigger on thermal change. He mounted it on the south exterior wall, angled toward the ventilation exhaust, at about 1800 hours on the 20th of November. He checked it the next morning. The footage was 37 seconds long. For the first 22 seconds, nothing, snow. The exhaust vent breathing its warm air, the ridge in the background dark against the sky. Then movement. Small, low to the ground, coming from the direction of the boulder field to the southeast, where the ridge pushed its fingers down into the lower terrain, moving with a kind of careful, deliberate caution, not running, not scurrying, moving the way a creature moves when it has thought about whether this is safe and decided, provisionally, that it might be. The shape was hard to read in the thermal imaging. It was warm, warmer than the air, obviously. That's why it registered, but smaller than he'd expected from the hollows in the snow. Maybe the size of a large house cat, or a very young. He stopped the footage, rewound, watched it again. The shape settled near the exhaust vent, coiled itself, tucked something ahead, he thought, a head tucked down, and went still. Then the camera's motion sensor stopped triggering, because the creature had stopped moving, and the footage ended. He sat with the tablet for a long time. What he had seen, what he thought he had seen, was not possible. Because the shape, when it settled, when it curled against the warm exhaust and tucked its head, the shape had wings, folded flat, leathery. hinged in the wrong places for any bird or bat cataloged in the Ashspine Survey database. He wrote in his paper journal that evening, "I think a dragon hatchling is sleeping by my heat vent. I think I'm going to leave it some food and see what happens." Chapter 5. The Meat. He left a piece of protein ration. The preserved kind, dense, smoked, the type that could sit in the cold for weeks without spoiling. He placed it on the flat rock nearest the exhaust vent, went inside, and did not look out the window for 2 hours. When he looked, it was gone. He put his face against the cold glass and searched the snow with his eyes and saw nothing moving. Whatever it was had come and taken the food and gone again before he'd looked. He left another piece the next night. Gone in the morning. And then something happened that he did not expect. He left the piece of protein ration on the flat rock at 2100 hours, and at 2137, while he was still at his workstation reviewing atmospheric data, while it was still early, while he was still awake and the lights were still on, the perimeter sensor chimed. He looked at the panel, south exterior, present. He went to the observation window, pressed his face against it. The lights from the interior spilled a weak yellow pool into the snow outside, and in that pool, crouched on the flat rock beside the exhaust vent, was a shape. It was small, scaled. Its skin, or its hide, was a dark reddish charcoal color, the kind of color that would be almost invisible against the volcanic rock of the upper ridge. Its eyes, when it looked up, when it looked directly at the window where Edrin's face was pressed against the glass, its eyes were amber, large, lit from within the way certain animals' eyes are, the tapetum lucidum effect, the shine of a thing that hunts in low light. It had a snout, short, blunt, suited for a young animal, the proportions of a face that hadn't finished growing yet. It looked at Edrin. Edrin looked at it. It picked up the piece of protein ration with a delicacy that surprised him, 2 forelimbs, tipped with small claws, handling the food with something that looked very much like consideration. And then it looked at him again. Then it moved to the exhaust vent, curled up, folded its wings over itself like a blanket, and closed its eyes. Edrin stood at the window for a long time. Then he went back to his workstation. He did not file a report. He did not contact the commission. He opened his personal journal and he wrote 3 words. There are 2. Because there were. When he looked again at the thermal panel before he went to bed, the south exterior showed not 1 thermal signature but 2, curled close together, sharing heat, small and warm and hidden from everything except his sensors and his heart. Chapter 6. 2 hatchlings. He named them. He knew this was inadvisable. He knew, in the abstract, professional way of a man who had spent years collecting data and calibrating instruments and maintaining objectivity, that naming wild animals was the first step toward a series of errors that compromised your judgment. He knew this. He named them anyway. The darker one, the reddish charcoal one he'd seen at the window, he called Ember. The second one, which he caught his first proper look at on the 27th of November, was slightly smaller, and its scaling was a darker gray-green that made him think of deep water. He called that one Slate. They were cautious. They did not come inside. They did not approach the doors. They slept by the exhaust vent, always arriving after the lights inside went dim, always gone before full sunrise. As if they had calculated the hours of his sleep with some internal precision and decided those were the safe hours. He began adjusting the ventilation output. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would show up in the station's mechanical logs as an anomaly. Just a slight increase in exhaust flow during the night hours, more warm air, more heat for them to sleep against. He didn't know then why he was doing this. He told himself it was curiosity, scientific observation, extended over time, building a behavioral profile of previously undocumented juvenile draconic organisms in the Ashspine lowlands. He had very good reasons. He had many good reasons. What he also had, and did not yet admit to himself, was a feeling he hadn't felt in a long time. The feeling of not being alone. Part 2, The Second Winter. Chapter 7, They left in spring. They left when the thaw came. He'd known they would. He'd told himself he was prepared for it, the way you tell yourself you're prepared for things. He woke up one morning in the middle of March. The temperature had lifted to -12, which in Ashbine terms was practically balmy, and the perimeter sensor showed nothing. No thermal signatures at the south exterior. No small warm shapes curled against his exhaust vent. He checked the camera footage. The previous night's recording showed Ember and Slate both present until approximately 300 hours. Then they left, together, moving back toward the boulder field and the upper ridge, moving with a different quality than their usual careful caution, moving with something that looked, if he was honest, like purpose, like they knew where they were going. He stood at the observation window for a while. The Ashbine was beginning its great light transition. The snow had the crusted, heavy look of snow that's starting to think about melting. He went and made coffee. He wrote in his journal, "They're gone. Good, they should go. They have somewhere else to be." Then below that, after a pause, "I hope they come back." Chapter 8, Vale Reach Commission Report, excerpt. Filed by Survey Engineer Evos, Station 7A. Date, April 3, 2042. RE, Winter Observation Period Summary. The winter observation period proceeded without major incident. Atmospheric readings remained within expected parameters. The eastern array experienced a minor calibration drift in February, corrected on the 14th. No significant biological activity detected in the survey zone. The ventilation system required minor adjustment in November due to cold weather pressure variance. All systems currently operational. He did not mention the hatchlings. He filed that report with the same careful competence he applied to everything. Factual, accurate, complete in all the ways that could be verified. The thing is, he wasn't sure then what he was protecting. He wasn't sure if he was protecting them or protecting himself. He just knew that the moment those words went into a commission report, the station would receive visitors, equipment, teams, people with instruments and protocols and a very specific idea of what a scientific opportunity looked like. And whatever was happening by his exhaust vent at night, whatever small, warm, amber-eyed thing had decided that his station was safe enough to sleep near, he didn't want that to change. He didn't want to be the person who changed it. Chapter 9, Autumn, 2042. They came back in November. He heard the perimeter sensor at 22:15, and he was still awake, sitting at his workstation with a second cup of coffee going cold beside him, and he looked at the panel and felt something loosen in his chest that he hadn't realized was tight. He didn't go to the window right away. He let them settle. He waited until the sensor registered the stillness of sleep, no movement, just two stable thermal signatures against the exhaust warmth, and then he got up quietly and went to the observation window and looked. Ember, Slate. Bigger, both of them noticeably bigger than they'd been when they left in spring. Ember's wingspan, folded now, tucked over its body, was visibly larger. Slate's coloring had deepened. They still slept pressed together, still tucked their heads under their wings. Still chose this wall, this vent, this particular warmth. He stood at the window for a long time and did not say anything because there was no one to say anything to. But he put his hand flat against the cold glass, like a gesture, like an acknowledgement. Then he went and adjusted the ventilation output. Chapter 10, The First Contact. It happened in December of 2042. He had been careful. He'd been so careful food left on the flat rock, lights dimmed at the same time every night, exhaust adjusted to keep the vent warm, camera footage reviewed every morning. He had built a system around them and the system worked, and the system kept a careful distance. Then one night he couldn't sleep. This happened sometimes. Not insomnia exactly, more like his mind would reach a certain point of turning things over and decide it wasn't done yet, and the body had no choice but to wait. He lay in his bunk for an hour, then gave up, put on socks, went to make tea. He was standing at the small kitchen unit when the motion sensor did something it had never done before. It registered movement at the south exterior door, not near the vent, at the door. He turned and looked. Through the narrow vertical window beside the door, a strip of glass about 8 centimeters wide, designed for checking conditions before you opened up, he could see Ember. Standing at his door. Not curled, not sleeping. Standing on its hind legs, which he had never seen it do, hadn't known it could do yet, hadn't realized how much it had grown, and looking at the door with those amber eyes. They looked at each other through the narrow strip of glass. His heart was doing something complicated. He opened the door. The cold came in immediately, and then Ember was there, right there, at the threshold, looking up at him with those lit amber eyes. And it was, he would say this later in the testimony that he eventually gave, in the words he finally let himself use, it was the size of a German shepherd by that point. Bigger than the footage had suggested. Old enough that its proportions were starting to shift from hatchling round to juvenile angular. Scales like cooling lava. Breath that was actually warm, not just body warm but genuinely warm, a heat that rolled off it in waves. They stood there for about 15 seconds. Then Ember put one foreleg over the threshold, testing, cautious, the amber eyes watching his face. He stepped back. Ember came inside. Chapter 11, A Dragon in the Kitchen. It stood in his kitchen and looked at everything with the alert, systematic attention of a creature cataloging a new environment. Its head swiveled. Its nostrils worked. He could see the small flare and settle of them, processing every smell. Its tail was held carefully, away from the shelving units, which told him something about its spatial awareness. It knew where it was in the room. It was being careful about the things around it. He did not move suddenly. He let it look, he let it take its time. After a few minutes, Ember looked at him. Then it looked at the low couch along the eastern wall, the one he slept on sometimes when his back was bad, the ratty one with the worn arm. It looked at the couch, and then it looked at him again. He said very quietly, "Yeah, go ahead." He had no idea if it understood language. He still doesn't, not fully, not in the way that question usually gets asked. But Ember moved to the couch, turned around twice in the way all animals turn around before they lie down, some ancient circular instinct that made him want to smile, and settled onto it. Wings folded, head down, tail curled around its body. And then it closed its eyes. He stood in his kitchen for a while, looking at the sleeping dragon on his couch. Then he got his tea, sat down at the workstation chair, and thought about what he was going to do. Chapter 12, Slate followed. It took 4 more nights. He left the south door slightly ajar, not open, just not fully latched so it moved at a touch, and on the 4th night, Slate followed Ember inside. They were different inside than they were at the vent. Not less cautious, they were always cautious, both of them, always watching him but more present, more there. Ember had claimed the couch. Slate preferred the floor near the eastern heating panel. Both of them held still during the hours he was awake and active, tracking him with their eyes the way prey animals track predators, not in fear, exactly, but in awareness, in the constant updating of an assessment. He learned their sounds. Ember had a low, resonant hum that it made when it was content, not quite a purr, lower than that, felt more than heard. Slate had a different sound, a clicking with its tongue against the roof of its mouth, which seemed to mean something like "I noticed that," an alert sound, cataloging. He learned their habits. Ember liked to press its nose against the observation windows, fogging the glass, watching the snow outside. Slate liked to be near warm metal, the heating panel, the base of the workstation where the processor gave off heat. He did not know where they went during the day. He never followed them. That felt like a line he shouldn't cross, not yet, maybe not ever. They came to him at night. That was the arrangement, though he hadn't arranged it. They had. They had decided the terms. He respected the terms. Part 3, The Middle Winters. Chapter 13, Dr. Amara Solis, Institute Director, Testimony. Delivered at the Cross-Species Coexistence Conference, Vale Reach City, September 2048. I want to be careful when I describe what Edrin Voss did, or did not understand about the implications of what was happening in that station. Because it would be easy, it's been easy. I've heard people do it to frame this as naivety, as a man so isolated that he lost perspective, as someone who, in the absence of human company, simply transferred his social instincts onto the nearest available warm body and called it science. That framing is wrong. I know it's wrong because I've read every log, every journal entry, every piece of footage from every one of those winters. And what you see in that record is not naivety. What you see is a man who understood, quite clearly, that something unprecedented was happening, and who chose, with full awareness of what he was choosing, to prioritize the relationship over the report. That's not naivety. That's a value judgment, a considered one, and whether you agree with it or not, I think it deserves to be understood as what it was. He knew those hatchlings had parents. He knew that. He never wrote in his journal that they were orphans or that they were abandoned. He wrote, I'm going to reference the specific entry, Volume 3, December 14, 2043, he wrote, they come to me at night and they go somewhere else during the day. That somewhere else is not nowhere. There are adult draconic thermal signatures on the upper ridge. The array picks them up periodically, large ones far away. Those are their people. Whatever this is, it's a secret they're keeping from those people. And I think they have their reasons. He understood the situation. He chose to be in it anyway. Chapter 14, Winter 2043, Personal Journal. Volume 3, Selected Entries, Edrin Voss, transcribed from handwritten original. December 3rd. Ember can breathe fire now. Not much, a small burst, blue at the center where it's hottest, about the length of my forearm. Showed me tonight by igniting the tip of the candle on the workstation. Seemed very pleased with itself about this. Slate watched and then tried it and produced a thin stream of smoke and one very small tongue of flame, and then looked at me with an expression that I can only describe as mortified. I told Slate it was very impressive. I'm not sure Slate believed me. December 19th. I've been thinking about the thermal signatures on the upper ridge. I tracked 4 distinct readings in the past week, all large, all above 200 kilograms estimated mass. The hatchlings' parents almost certainly, maybe other adults. And the hatchlings come down here every night. What do they tell their parents? Do they tell them anything? Do the parents wonder where they go? Do they follow? I don't think they follow. If they knew about me, I think I would know. Things that large, moving toward the station, the arrays would light up. Nothing has lit up. The hatchlings are keeping a secret, a very careful secret. I wonder how long secrets like that can keep. January 8th, 2044. Slate touched my hand tonight. I was sitting at the workstation and Slate was near the heating panel, and I don't know what prompted it. I wasn't doing anything particular, just reviewing pressure data. But Slate came over and stood beside my chair and put one foreleg, one forepaw, the left one on top of my hand. Just for a moment, then moved back to the heating panel. I sat for a long time with my hand where it was, on the keyboard, not moving. I don't know how to write what that felt like. February 14th. They're getting big. This is obvious, this is not a surprise. Juveniles of any species get bigger, but it's one thing to know that and another thing to notice, suddenly, that Ember now takes up the entire couch. All of it. Legs hanging off one end, head on the arm at the other. It happened gradually and then all at once, the way things do, and tonight I sat in my chair and looked at this large creature wedged impractically onto my couch, sleeping with a noise like a low earthquake, and I thought, This is the best winter I've ever had. That's a strange thing to think. It's -34 outside. I have 12 tins of protein ration left until the spring supply run. The eastern array has developed a vibration I haven't been able to diagnose, and this is the best winter I've ever had. Chapter 15, The Commission Call. He almost told them. In February of 2044, he almost made the call. The commission had a standard check-in protocol, every 3 months, voice contact with the regional coordinator. He made the call at the scheduled time, gave the standard report, and then sat with his hand on the communicator for a full minute after the call ended, thinking about whether to call back. There were people at the commission who should know this. There were researchers who had spent careers studying draconic behavior, draconic biology, the question of whether adult dragons could coexist with human structures. He had, sitting in his station on any given winter night, more data on juvenile draconic behavior than existed in any database on the continent. He should call them. He put down the communicator. He thought about what would happen, the teams that would come, the instruments, the protocols, the way the word unprecedented would bring people like gravity brings objects quickly, inevitably with force. He thought about Ember on the couch and Slate at the heating panel. He thought about the careful, patient way they had decided to trust him. The way they flinched just slightly, just a tightening of their wings whenever he moved too fast. The way that flinching had decreased over 3 winters, the way that trust had been built, increment by increment, night by night, because he had never once done anything to threaten it. A team of researchers would not have his patience. A team of researchers would have their protocols. He did not call back. Chapter 16, The Fourth Winter and What Changed. Personal Journal, Winter 2044-2045. November 29th. They're not hatchlings anymore. I don't know the proper terminology for the developmental stage of a draconic juvenile. The Commission's database doesn't go into that level of granularity, which tells you something about how much we don't know, but they're not small. Ember is the size of a draft horse. Slate is slightly smaller, but not by much. They can't both fit inside the station anymore without it being genuinely crowded. So we made a new arrangement. They sleep outside again, back at the exhaust vent, back in the snow, but I leave the south door open and they put their heads in. It sounds ridiculous. It is a little ridiculous. But Ember's head inside the door and its body outside in the snow is somehow better to both of us than Ember curled fully outside and me inside with the door closed. We compromise. We find the arrangement that works. Slate seems fine outside. Slate has always been more comfortable in the cold. December 22nd. Something happened tonight that I've been trying to figure out how to write down. Ember and I were in our usual arrangement, me at the workstation, Ember's head through the south door, its breath warming the south quadrant of the station considerably, which is actually better than the heating panel. And I was doing something, reviewing the November atmospheric data, something routine. And I said, out loud to no one because I talk to myself now, have for years. I can't figure out where this pressure differential is coming from. It's consistent, but it doesn't match any of the usual sources. And Ember made a sound, the low hum, the content sound, but modulated differently, higher at the end, questioning. I looked at Ember. Ember was looking at the atmospheric data display on my screen. I said, feeling slightly absurd, the pressure readings. On the eastern array. Ember made the sound again. Then it did something with its eyes, the amber irises moving, focusing, and looked at the screen and then looked up and to the right. At the wall. In the direction of the eastern ridge. Something on the eastern ridge is affecting the readings. The hum, low steady, the content sound. Is it the fissure? There's a new volcanic fissure I mapped in the spring. The hum changed again, rose at the end. I stared at Ember. I said, Are you trying to answer me? The hum stayed steady. I turned to the atmospheric display, and I moved the analysis window, and I found the Fisher data, and I ran the pressure correlation, and it took me 20 minutes, but it was the Fisher, the new Eastern Fisher, venting intermittently, producing exactly the kind of pressure signature I'd been trying to source for 6 weeks. I sat back in my chair and looked at Ember. "Thank you," I said. The hum. I don't know what Ember understands. I don't know how much of human language is noise and how much is meaning to a draconic mind. But I know that something understood something tonight, and whatever it was trying to tell me. Chapter 17, Witness Account, Dr. Kellenmer. Title, Senior Draconic Behavioral Researcher, Vale Reach Institute. Date of statement, April 2048. Interviewer, Dr. Amara Solis. When we finally accessed the records from the Ashspine station, I'll be honest with you, my first reaction was scientific excitement. My second reaction, almost immediately following, was something closer to awe, which is not an emotion I'm accustomed to having about a research record. Because what Voss documented over those winters is extraordinary, not because it's unprecedented in the widest sense. There have been historical accounts, old ones, of draconic human coexistence, usually dismissed as folklore or embellishment, but because the record is granular. It's not a man lived with dragons. It's a behavioral log with timestamps. It's an emotional register kept in real time by someone who was, despite everything, a trained observer. The cognition question, the communication question that he raises in the December 22nd entry. I've spent 4 months analyzing that entry and the acoustic data from the station recordings. What I can say, cautiously, with appropriate scientific hedging, is this. The draconic larynx produces sounds in a frequency range that overlaps with human auditory processing in ways that are not random. The modulation patterns that Voss described as questioning and steady affirmation are consistent across multiple recorded instances. They are consistent across both Ember and Slate, suggesting a shared communicative system, not individual learned behavior. What I believe, though I can't prove it yet, is that juvenile draconic organisms have a significantly greater capacity for cross-species communication than any existing model predicted. And that capacity was not discovered in a laboratory. It was discovered by a man who kept the lights dim and the exhaust warm and left food on a flat rock in the snow. The methodology is not one I could have designed. The results are some of the most significant in the history of my field. Part 4, The Fifth Winter. Chapter 18, Something Was Different This Year. Personal Journal, November 2045. They came back in November. I heard the sensor at 21:30, later than usual. I went to the observation window and saw them both, Ember and Slate, moving through the lower boulder field in the dark, moving toward the station. But they stopped short. They stopped at the edge of the flat area around the station, maybe 15 meters out, and they stood there, not approaching, not retreating, just standing, and there was something in how they stood. Tension, in the set of their wings, in the position of their heads, the way you hold your body when you're listening very hard. I watched them for 10 minutes. They didn't move. They kept looking back toward the upper ridge, back the way they'd come. Then they made a decision. I could see it, the shift, the moment they committed. They came the rest of the way. Ember put its head through the south door. Slate settled at the vent. But even after they settled, Ember kept looking back. I sat up very late that night, watching. Chapter 19, The Larger Signatures. Personal Journal, November 12, 2045. The Eastern Array picked up 4 large thermal signatures on the upper ridge tonight. Not new, I've seen large signatures up there before. What I've always assumed were the parents and other adults. But they were closer than usual. The array put them at roughly 3 kilometers from the station. 3 kilometers is still far. 3 kilometers is closer than they've ever been. I'm not going to say I wasn't worried. I was. I'm not entirely sure what a parent dragon does when it discovers its juveniles have been spending their winters at a human research station, but accepts it calmly. Doesn't feel like the most likely option. Ember seemed distracted, kept looking south, not toward the upper ridge where the signatures were, but south, in the direction I've never understood. Somewhere beyond the lower boulder field, beyond the area I've ever surveyed. I said, Ember, are they looking for you? Ember looked at me, then looked south. Is there a third place, somewhere else you go? Ember made a sound I hadn't heard before. Not the hum, not the clicking. A lower sound, more complex, somewhere between a growl and a chord, if you can imagine such a thing. It raised the hairs on my arm. I didn't know what it meant. I wrote it down anyway. Chapter 20, Pira Dunson, Return Visit. Witness account, March 2048 continued. I did the spring 2046 supply run. Came in at the end of March, a little later than usual because the pass had been difficult. I expected Edrin to look the same as always. Settled, stone in water. He looked tired. Not sick, not the kind of tired that worries you about someone's health. The kind of tired that comes from carrying something. He helped me unload the supplies and we ate, and I asked him how the winter had been and he said fine, everything fine, and I knew he was lying. Not in a bad way. In the way of someone who has something they want to say and have decided not to say it. I let it go, it wasn't my place. But at dinner I noticed something. On his couch on the south side of the station, along that wall, there was a large depression in the old upholstery. The kind that comes from something very heavy sitting in the same spot repeatedly over a long time. And along the south door frame, there were marks in the composite material. Not scratches, more like wear marks. The kind left by something that passed through a door many times. Something large. I looked at those marks and I looked at Edrin, and he was looking at his food with great concentration. I said, Ed. He looked up. Whatever's happening, I said, I hope it's okay. He looked at me for a moment, and then he smiled, a real one, not his polite, careful one. He said, yeah, I think it's okay. He didn't say anything else. I didn't push. But I thought about those marks on the door frame all the way home. Part 5, The Sixth Winter and the Discovery. Chapter 21, What the Arrays Showed. Personal Journal, December 2nd, 2046. I need to record what happened last night very carefully, because I don't entirely trust my memory of it yet. The way you don't trust a memory that is too large, that has too many parts, too many feelings. You want to set it down in words while the shape of it is still clear. Last night, the large signatures moved from 3 kilometers to 1.5. I saw this on the array at about 2200. Ember and Slate were already inside, Ember's head through the south door, Slate on the floor near the heating panel. And I looked at the array, and those 4 signatures were at 1.5 kilometers. Moving slowly, not running, deliberate. I said, Ember. Ember lifted its head from the door frame, looked at me. They're close tonight. I watched Ember's face, if that's the right word, if a draconic face is the right concept, and I watched something move through it. Something I didn't have a name for. Ember made the complex sound again, the chord growl, but this time it was different, longer, more structured, like something being said. Slate heard it too. Slate sat up from the heating panel and looked at Ember and then looked at me, and then looked at the wall in the direction of the upper ridge. Then both of them were very still. And the array showed the large signatures stop moving. 1.5 kilometers stopped. We all held still together in the station and in the snow, and I thought, they know. Chapter 22, The Night Everything Changed. From the reconstructed timeline, based on array data, camera footage, personal journal entries, and subsequent testimony from Dr. Kellen Murr's behavioral analysis. It was December 4th, 2046. At 21:47 hours, the Eastern Array registered the large signatures at 900 meters and closing. Edrin saw this. He stood up from his workstation. Ember lifted its head from the door frame. Slate stood up from the floor. For a moment, just a moment, the way a single second can sometimes hold more than it should, all three of them were in the same posture, same alertness, same attention directed at the south exterior. At 22:03, the perimeter sensors began registering. Not one signature, not two. Four large thermal signatures approaching the station from the south and southwest, moving in a way the sensor algorithms described as coordinated, moving the way animals move when they are not hunting, but when they are also not casual, purposeful, controlled. Edrin moved to the south door. Ember's head came fully out of the door frame and turned away from Edrin toward the dark beyond the station's lights, and Ember made a sound that Edrin had never heard before. Not the hum, not the cord growl, a sound that was entirely new, long, resonant, carrying, the sound of something calling across a distance. The sound was answered. From out in the dark, from somewhere in the boulder field and beyond, something answered. Something that shook the station walls. Something that registered on the atmospheric sensors as a pressure spike. Something that was, there was no other word, a voice. Enormous and structured and alive. Edrin put his hand on the south door handle. He had a choice: close the door, activate the station's security protocol, barricade, wait. That was the protocol. That was the designed response to large biological entities at close range. He opened the door. Chapter 23, What Came Out of the Dark. Personal Journal, December 4th, 2046, continued. I can write this now. I've been trying to write it for 2 days and I keep stopping because the words feel too small. But I'm going to try. When I opened the south door, Ember and Slate moved out. I stepped out behind them. And for a moment I was just standing in the dark and the cold, looking at my station from outside it, which is always slightly disorienting. And then there was light. Not electric light, not the station lights behind me. Something else, a warm light, amber-orange, coming from beyond the boulder field. The light of living fire contained, not burning anything, just present. Like something had brought a sun and set it down in the snow and it was sitting there, patient, waiting. I walked forward. I don't know exactly why I walked forward. I think maybe by then I didn't have any choice left, not in the sense of being forced, but in the sense that there was only one thing my feet were willing to do. I walked around the boulders. And I saw them. 4 adult dragons. I have no frame of reference for the word adult in this context. I have Ember. I have Slate. I have the knowledge that they are the size of draft horses and the knowledge that I've stopped being afraid of that. I had no preparation for adult. Adult was, the word that comes is tectonic. The word that comes is geological. One of them was lying down and its body was the length of my station. Not an exaggeration. I measured it later from the impression in the snow. 14 meters. The one that was standing, wings half raised, eyes on me, those amber eyes the same as Ember's but larger, so much larger, like 2 moons in the dark. It was 15 meters at the shoulder. I stopped walking. Ember and Slate moved past me. They went to the adults. And the adults, one of them, the one with its wings raised, the large one, it curved its neck down and put its nose to Ember's head. The same way you'd touch a child. The same gesture, enormous and careful and unmistakably tender. I stood in the snow. The large one looked at me. I said something. I'm not sure what. Probably my own name. Edrin Voss, I'm the survey engineer at Station 7A, something like that. The things you say when you're doing the human equivalent of spreading your hands open to show you're not holding anything. The large one, Ember's parent, I was almost certain. Ember was between us and kept looking from one to the other. The large one was still. Then it made a sound. Not the hum, Not the calling sound from before. Something slower, something with more space inside it, something that took almost a full minute to complete. I didn't understand it. I don't understand draconic vocal communication. I have some data, 6 years of journal entries, some acoustic recordings, but I don't speak the language. I probably never will. But I listened. I listened the whole time. I didn't move. I didn't look away. When the sound stopped, I waited. Then I said, I don't know if you can understand me. I don't know how much translates, but I want you to know that they're safe. They've been safe every winter. I didn't know what to do about it at first. Maybe I should have reported it, but they chose this. They chose to come here. And I stopped. I said, I'm glad they did. The large one looked at me. Its eyes were doing something, moving, focusing, the same precise attention I'd seen in Ember, cataloging. Then it made a different sound, short, 2 syllables by the rhythm of it, directed at me. Ember made a sound in response, the hum but different, steady, reassuring. The large one looked at me again. And it lowered its head. Not all the way, not to the ground, but significantly, an inclination, a gesture that was, I don't want to project meaning onto an animal behavior I don't fully understand. I am supposed to be a scientist. I am supposed to be careful about this, but it looked like acknowledgement. It looked like respect. I lowered my head back. Chapter 24, Dr. Kellen Murr, Behavioral Analysis. From the report, Cross-Species Communication Events, Ashspine Station, 2046-2048. Published, Vale Reach Institute Press, January 2049. The December 4th event is the most significant single data point in the case File 7 Ember record, and its analysis occupies the largest section of this report. I want to be careful about the language I use here, because the language matters and the temptation to overstate is significant. What we have from the December 4th encounter. The array data confirms 4 large adult draconic organisms, subsequently designated EA1 through EA4, were present at the boulder field adjacent to the station. The acoustic sensors, which Voss had improved significantly over his time at the station, captured the full vocal exchange between EA1, the presumed parent of juvenile E, Ember, and Voss. The vocal production by EA1 is extraordinary. The duration alone, 54 seconds, is significantly longer than any recorded draconic vocalization in the existing literature. The frequency range it covers is also unusual. When we ran the acoustic profile against Voss's recordings of Ember's communicative sounds, we found overlap in the low-frequency range that suggests structural similarity, a shared base, a shared grammar, if you will. What was EA1 saying? I cannot tell you with certainty. The field of draconic acoustic linguistics is in its infancy because the field has had almost no data to work with. What I can tell you is that when we ran the vocalization through the pattern analysis tools we use for other high-cognition species, we got something interesting. The vocalization shows structural markers consistent with inquiry followed by assertion. It's not a command. It's not a threat display. It's the acoustic shape of a question followed by a statement. My best current interpretation, offered with appropriate tentativeness. The question was about Edrin Voss. The statement was about the hatchlings. I believe EA1 was asking Voss something, possibly who he was, possibly what his intentions were, and then making a statement about Ember and Slate, about their years in his station, about the secret they had kept. I believe EA1 already knew everything.